Hello and a very warm welcome to the second episode of Agroecology around Arran, the podcast series exploring the stories that shape sustainable farming, resilient food systems and community life on a small Scottish island. In our first episode we explored meat production on Arran, speaking to livestock farmers who are adapting their practices and business models to modern market pressures and changing consumer demands while staying rooted in traditional approaches that suit the island's unique climate and landscape. In this second episode, we continue our journey through Arran's livestock sector with a deep dive into dairy. As you'll hear, milk production on the island has had somewhat of a turbulent history, with external pressures such as pasteurisation legislation pushing the industry to the brink of collapse at the end of the 20th century. However, thanks to the determination and creativity of a small number of islanders, the last remaining dairy herd on Arran survives to this day. In this episode we learn how collaboration between dairy farmers and producers on the island has helped keep local milk at the heart of the community. We begin by speaking to Matthew Dobson from Arran Dairies, a small but influential local business that works with the island's dairy farm to collect and process their milk. We then head to Blackwaterfoot to meet local cheesemaker Callum Chaplin from Arran Cheese Shop before ending the episode with an honest and thoughtful conversation with farmer John Murchie from Timefrere Farm, home to the last remaining dairy herd on the island. So, let's get started. We're now sitting down with Matthew Dobson of Arran Dairies. Matthew, how are you?
Good, thank you, Ross.
Matthew, Arran Dairies has been part of the island food system for a while now. Can you tell us a bit about how the dairy began and the role it plays on the island today?
So Arran Dairies started back in the 1970s by my grandparents when pasteurisation laws came in. So we'd previously been farming at our family farm at Westnow in Brodick. So at that point there was lots of small dairy farms around the island. At that time they would probably be delivering milk to the few houses within their village. But when the pasteurisation laws came in, it was going to be quite a lot of investment for all these small farms to be able to buy a bulk tank that would be able to heat the milk up to pasteurise it safely. So my grandparents started Arran Dairies. The milk would be collected from all of the small farms around the island and bulk pasteurised at one site in Brodick, which saved a whole lot of hassle for all these small farmers. So that was how it kind of started. We're nearly 50 years on from that now. I think it was 1978 that it started, so 50 years old in a couple of years' time. So the business has developed loads since then. Initially we started processing ice cream in 2000s, just to customers on Arran. That then developed on to 2014, where we actually stopped processing just liquid milk. At that point, ice cream sales were going really well actually across the whole of the UK by this point, and not just on the island. At the same time, while the milk sales were dropping quite significantly on the island, there was 3 co-ops on the island by this point, so the demand for our local milk had kind of fallen away a wee bit. So we took the chance to refit our production area into solely ice cream manufacturing. Kind of plodded on like that for a few years, and in 2019 there was quite a significant development on the island when First Milk closed the cheese processing plant that they had, which then led to the largest dairy farm at the time on the island closing, over in Limlash. So that left us with one dairy farm, and the most important ingredient for our ice cream was milk. So we had to kind of react to that and try and make sure that we could keep dairy farming going on the island, or play our part in keeping dairy farming going on the island. So we had to buy a small milk tanker which would allow us to go and pick up milk from this sole remaining dairy farm. So we were able to do that, but to help give him a bit of extra volume to keep him going and to make it worthwhile, we actually reintroduced liquid milk, or Arran milk, this time through vending machines. So we took all the hassle out of having a filling line, filling like 500ml bottles, litre bottles or 2 litre bottles. It was all done through vending machines. We've now got about 15 vending machines around the island, which is a great environmental and sustainability story. I'm sure we'll come on to that later, but that's a kind of broad overview of where Arran Dairies was and where it sits now.
When we think of milk collection, we think of massive tankers, which is very important. But the tanker you guys use is almost plays intimately into the story as well.
Yeah.
It's smaller than the pickup that takes it.
We've got a 2,000 litre tank. We pick up milk 3 times a week, back here within a few hours and processed within a few hours.
Once the milk leaves this farm, what actually happens at the dairy before it reaches the people of Arran?
The milk usually arrives at our dairy, so we pick up 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the milk is back on site at our dairy within a few hours of milking really, so we have it back here at 7 in the morning. We then go through the kind of processing stages, so we pasteurise the milk up to about 64 degrees and hold it for 30 minutes. There's lots of different ways to pasteurise milk. Most other industrial processes will heat the milk up to a much higher temperature than that, but we want to try and keep the milk in its most natural state as possible while still ticking the pasteurisation box, because we obviously have to do that legally. So we find that taking it to 64 degrees and holding it for 30 minutes kind of treats the milk a bit more gently, but still removes the harmful bacteria that could potentially be in it. It also keeps the natural flavour and nutritional qualities without taking it up and overly processing it. Pasteurisation process itself will take maybe 1 to 2 hours, depending on the volume. And then it goes through a heat exchanger and is instantly cooled to 5 degrees. And we package it then into churns. So we've got 10, 25 and 50 litre churns that go to the various vending machines around the island. So we'll go into our chill. Sometimes it's barely sat down on the floor and it's back out there into one of our vans and delivered around the island to shops, cafes, various businesses and the vending machine sites. So because everything happens so locally, the milk can really go from the farm to the end user within, I would say, 3 to 4 hours, which is quite unusual to go and buy your compared to buying milk from a supermarket. So yeah, that short supply chain can really keep the freshness of the milk. It's obviously a massive reduction in food miles as well, which is a great story for us.
We're quite interested in what the longest food miles is, because what is it, time frame to here is maybe 10, I don't know roughly, and then the longest you can really get the other way is about 20, so the absolute max, and I'm not even sure if there's a place at that, wherever that location is about 30 miles. And one of the big things that's quite notable about Arran milk is, yes, it's pasteurised, but it's not homogenised, which is a thing that as the consumer we became very sort of accustomed to it being, so people often notice the cream at the top, a thing I'm very fond of, but some people look at it differently. Why have you chosen to keep that milk as naturally as you can?
Kind of going back to when we initially were processing milk, we didn't homogenise that either pre-2014. So when we brought it back in, we wanted to kind of keep it as close to possible as how the product that we pick up from the farm is. Really to try and have a bit of a USP, because there's tons of other milks that are homogenised that people are going to go and buy in the supermarket. So we really want to try and find a product that's at somewhere different. So the non-homogenised milk keeps the natural cream layer, which some people like, some people don't like, but it's often what people remember from. It's a bit of nostalgia for maybe the older people, but it does give the milk a much richer flavour and texture. I think also there seems to now be an increase in consumers wanting that kind of natural product, a minimally processed product, and hopefully the kind of natural cream line maybe reminds people that it hasn't been overly processed and it is in its natural form, kind of like what picking up milk direct from a farm should be like, and obviously that hopefully reminds people that it's a local product as well.
You touched on the vending machines there, Matthew. You see them around the shops, and I think you've got them in some restaurants and sort of hotels as well now. They've become quite a feature across the island. How do they help reconnect people with local milk and understand that reduction in food miles?
We feel that the vending machines can help create a direct connection between the farm, Arran Dairies, and eventually the end user. I think it's quite unique the way that people fill their own bottles. So we've got the advantage that it takes a bit of processing and labour away from us, but there's this novelty factor that people get to fill their own bottles. Often people are filling from a vending machine that's just a few miles away from the farm, as you kind of mentioned earlier, which is a very unique thing as well. A huge reduction in packaging waste. Plastic milk bottles get a bit of bad press. I think they're one of the main household plastic wastes these days. So being able to take them away from environmental waste is great. And obviously a huge reduction in transport miles as well, as we've already talked about. I think there's also something quite enjoyable and memorable, especially for visitors, when they go and fill up their bottles. They've got their glass bottle, they go and find the nearest vending machine, and the kids get to fill it up, or the adults love it as well. And they finish the bottle, they wash it out, and they can go and repeat that, and they can do that a few times a week, which is a bit more of an enjoyable experience than just buying a bottle of plastic milk from your supermarket.
Food's a necessity, so it needs to be there, but also when you're in the position where you're able to, it's nice to have that story behind it. And the one that always springs to mind is there's a post office in Blackwaterfoot on the island that, I mean, if there's obviously no people that are 10 metres tall, but if you were 10 metres tall, you would literally see the farm from where it is. It's a matter of a few hundred metres away.
Well, you're looking at the cows as you pretty much fill up from that vending machine, aren't you?
Exactly. Yeah. Which is brilliant. And also the bottle is very nice as well.
Yeah, that helps.
A part to play. We were used to milk bottles where you pick it up by the handle, the plastic bottle, green, blue, or hopefully not red. It's just words, really. There might be the odd one that has a cow on it or a glass of milk or something like that, but in general this is for you to drink and that's it doesn't matter.
It's a good souvenir to take home from your holiday on Arran as well.
So. Very much so. We've touched on it, Matthew, and we speak to Alistair, someone you know quite well, through this series as well, who goes into it in a wee bit more detail, but a large chunk of Arran Dairies now is, alongside the milk, you've also got ice cream. How does the side of the business fit into the wider story? So
ice cream is definitely the main part of the business now. I think in the early 2000s it probably just seemed like a bit of a natural extension from what we're already doing with the liquid milk processing, and it's definitely a bit more exciting than just being a liquid milk processor, certainly in terms of the products that we're able to create and stuff. So alongside the Arran cheese, I think it really helps add value to the Arran milk. It's great to have milk, and it's great to have cheese, and it's great to have ice cream, all produced using their main ingredient is the milk from Arran. So it kind of helps showcase that. Obviously tourism is a huge part on the island, food tourism is a huge part on the island as well. So I think it really complements all the other products that you've probably heard about, oatcakes and cheese and chutneys and all the rest of it. So ice cream can definitely help create memorable experiences for both locals and visitors.
What flavours is there?
So we have 8 main flavours that we stock. They're in our kind of pre-packaged tubs, the wee 120ml or 750ml tubs. But in any given year, we can probably do up to 40 or 50 flavours. So we do a lot of bespoke flavours for chefs or special events. So we can do things down to like 3 or 4 tubs. So we've done all kinds of flavours. I think we've just had a request in overnight there for rhubarb, honey and rose.
Oh, that sounds
so,
good.
Yeah, one flavour. So it's quite exciting. That's the thing that I'm meaning about when you move away from just processing milk. One day you can be making a rhubarb, honey and rose. The next day you can be making 2,000 litres of chocolate kind of thing. So it's quite good. We get to play around with different flavours and no 2 days the same, really.
Away from sort of maybe the technical side of it, you guys have won a pretty notable award in the last month or so. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So the National Ice Cream Awards, which are held by hosted by the Ice Cream Alliance, we've been entering them probably for most of the years that we've been making ice cream. So I would say for over 20 years now. We've done okay in the past. We've had some bronze and silvers, which are 3rd and 2nd. We managed to this year win the best vanilla in the whole of the UK. Gave the team a bit of a boost going into a busy season and get a bit of recognition across the whole of the UK. So we're delighted with that.
And maybe just to end off, you raise a good point there. When a lot of people think of, for want of a better word, plain ice cream, they think of vanilla, which is not the case because it's literally a flavour.
Yeah.
And we've almost taken that into fashion culture and societal culture. Your staple is actually traditional, which is a milk ice cream. It's not a vanilla ice cream. Yeah,
so in our traditional ice cream, which is actually our biggest seller across all of our pack sizes, there's no flavours at all. Well, there's natural flavourings, but we don't add any flavours. So we've got it's basically milk, cream and sugar, skim milk powder and the emulsifier stabiliser system that we use. So we don't add any flavours at all. Our vanilla ice cream has vanilla flavouring added to it. So yeah, people just seem to love the traditional ice cream. It goes along, if you're using it in a hotel or a restaurant or something, it goes alongside most desserts. It can cut through like a intense chocolate dessert quite well, but it can also accompany like a crumble or something. It's the easiest one for us to make as well because we don't have to add any flavours. So
I would say one of my favourite times of year is when the brambles start to pop out. I go and pick up a kilo or so and just make a massive bramble crumble, and it's an embarrassing amount of traditional ice cream on top of it.
Good stuff.
Matthew, thank you very much.
Yeah, cheers Wallace.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now that really was an interesting conversation with Matthew there. I've always found it especially inspiring to hear how Arran Dairies emerged almost as a community-driven response to the introduction of pasteurisation laws that threatened the future of small-scale dairy farming here on the island. It's such a strong example of the resilience and resourcefulness of island communities and demonstrates the power of collective action in the face of external challenges to farming livelihoods. That same pride in local ingredients and craftsmanship that we heard in Matthew's interview carries through to the next stop on our dairy journey. In the following part of the episode, we meet Callum Chaplin, who has spent more than 30 years producing award-winning soft cheeses at Arran Cheese Shop. Callum takes us on a tour of the Blackwaterfoot cheese factory before explaining more about the cheese-making processes and what gives Arran cheese its unique character.
Well, today we're making blue. This morning we were expecting to get an extra 200 litres, but it's been a bit hit and miss. But this is the last day of production for this week, so we always make blue on the last day. So that's about 80 gallons in there, which we started the process this morning about 6 o'clock. We start putting the milk through the pasteuriser. And then we don't start what we call the start of the cheese making process until all the milk's through. So I've got a wee chart over here which just gives us a rundown of the processes that we do. So the milk itself all came through by 8 o'clock this morning. We've put rennet in at 9 o'clock. Now we use a vegetarian rennet rather than an animal rennet, mainly because it just gives us a broader customer base. We cut this cheese at 10:30, so it's just about ready for cutting. In fact, I'll do that now so you can see how we do that. We'll stir it at 11, and then what we call pitch, which we use these jugs and fine nets to separate the whey from the curds. So 90% of this volume of milk is wastage, which isn't wastage because it's used as fertilizer on the farm. So it goes into a tank in the field opposite the road. We'll take that down to about 10%, and that will give us solid curds, which are poured equally into these moulds, which are not second-hand waste pipes, they're new. And then we'll leave it for about 20 minutes once it's been evenly distributed, and then we'll turn it. And then we'll leave it for a few days just to stand and dry out. And then we brine it for an unspecified time, because that's one of the secrets. And then we'll pierce it 40 times on each side with one of these. So it's very labour intensive. And then we'll mature it in our maturing room that we're going to have a look at for 8 to 12 weeks. In fact, it stays in the maturing room, maturing in there for a month, but the whole process itself is 8 to 12 weeks because we'll put it in our chill, and then we'll just sell it as we think it's ready for sale. The start, the 8 o'clock in the morning, we added cultures, and we also added the mould, which is a liquid mould. So the cultures in the mould, that's still 90% wastage, but it works. And as you can see over here, most of our cheese is sold in these small semicircles.
Mm-hmm. Are these ready to sell?
They're ready to sell, yeah. So the cheese is going from here. This is one that was made yesterday standing. So we'll brine that on Monday, and then we'll take it out the next day, and then it'll be ready for the process of the piercing and going into the store. These are the small ones which we don't actually have a use for. So if anybody local wants them, we just give them away. Yeah. Or if anybody's, George Grassy will take some for something he's doing. Butcher will take some if he's doing something different. And we also make Crowdy, which is in here, which is just a cream-based product, but we only sell it in our shop. And for example, the Brie, we'll give curds to Lag Distillery. They've got a dish that they use curds in. And as with Alan down the road behind the butchers with his cabin, he uses them. So we'll help anybody out. We've got this is actually Brie whey, which is, of course, Brie is 10% added cream. Mm-hmm. It's very good for, George takes it for his pastry products. Okay. Gives it a lighter texture. Yeah. And we don't charge for these things. It's just
plays into that circularity, doesn't it?
Yeah. If they mention it, as the idea is we sell more products through word of mouth, which is the cheapest form of advertising.
Back in the studio, I had a few more questions for Callum. Is that maturation process something that can go on indefinitely, or is there you can mature for too long with a cheese?
You can mature it for too long. Because we're using live cultures, then the cheese that we make is effectively a living product. Say you got a block of cheddar and you cut a bit off it and then left it in the fridge for longer than you would want. It's going to start, the cut surface will start growing mould. And it's the same process with any cheese, really. So it will just keep living.
Why is your white cheeses in that sort of papery product and your blue cheese in that tinfoil product?
Well, both products allow the product to breathe, which is important. I've seen vacuum-packed blue cheese with a lot of liquid floating about in the packet, and that's what happens. If it can breathe, it can lose moisture naturally rather than it being compressed.
And when someone comes over to Arran or buy it off the island, Callum, and they taste Arran cheese, what part of the process or ingredients are defining that character?
The most important thing that defines the character is the quality of the milk. It's a really creamy milk. It's like the old-fashioned milk you get where there's a lot of cream at the top. You put it in a bottle, which we sell a lot of on the island. So it's naturally a really creamy product. If you think that the cows themselves, not only are they eating grass, they're eating all the fauna that grows in that grass. It gives it character and depth.
And that's the sort of the side of that from what you taste on the plate. But is it important to you that local milk supply is involved? I mean, where you process this cheese, you can probably see the farm from where the milk is taken. Is that important from that perspective?
I think it's vital. In the past, when we used first milk, we had problems with supply or being able to get enough and had to source it from elsewhere. And the quality just wasn't there. It's like supermarket milk. Even the full fat stuffs had lots of things taken out of it that are used for other things. It's basically, it hasn't been interfered with.
Yeah, that's a nice thought as well. I'm used to, Callum, eating this cheese 6 miles from where it's produced. It's often on our plates of a weekend, and God, I hate to think how much I have at Christmas. But how far afield is this going? Is this sold throughout the UK? Is it sold further afield?
It's not really. I mean, it's predominantly has been the central belt of Scotland, and maybe as far up as Perth and Aberdeen at farmers' markets. Because it does have a short shelf life, there isn't really a lot of point in trying to put it further afield. Plus, it's made in very small batches. We only have a certain amount of space for maturing and producing that, if we committed to, say a supermarket, which we would never do, but heaven forbid we did, and it gave us problems with demand, then, suddenly the whole model falls apart.
It gives a real air of exclusivity to it, though, by that, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. It does. There's quite a lot of people that I meet that haven't heard of it, even people that come down to Arran, and also people that lived here for a while, just don't notice it in some cases. But when you do tell them about it, they're quite surprised and, excited about trying it.
A vast chunk of Arran's food heritage comes with award-winning lore, and even this dairy story as we have now, focusing on the ice cream, has that too. And that's certainly no different in this soft cheese. Could you tell us about some of them?
We've won the World Cheese Award. Before we left the EU, we could actually enter these competitions. But after we left the EU, it became so difficult, prohibitive actually, to do a lot of competitions. But when we did, for example, the Blue was named Best Scottish Cheese 3 years in a row. And all the cheeses have won up to the gold standard, if not bronze and silver, some years. So we know we're doing things right.
How does that feel?
Well, it's nice to be recognised by your peers. And it's nice to know that you're not cutting corners and that you're still doing things the way that you think they should be done. And there is a sense of gratification that you're getting recognised.
Not cutting corners, cutting cheese.
Yeah, it's easier to cut the cheese.
Oh, Callum, thank you. Thank you very much.
That's a pleasure.
Thank you. A huge thanks once again must go to Callum for sharing his cheese-making secrets with us, and also for showing us around the factory. If you ever get the chance to try any of the cheeses from Arran Cheese Shop, I would highly recommend them. And I'm not just doing that because I have to. I eat them often. To round off this episode, we speak with John Murchie. John reflects on how life on Tyne Farm has changed since it was acquired by his family in 1953, and shares some fascinating insights into both the history and the modern day realities of producing milk on an island. So we're now here with John Murchie from Tyne Farm, the only remaining dairy farmer here on Arran. Good to see you, John. How are you?
Thank you very much.
Good to have you here. John, you and I live a matter of a few miles away from each other, but can you tell us, for those listening, just about Tyne Farm and the dairy herd you've got in Shiskin?
Run roughly 60 dairy cows and milking 50 all the time. So it's all year round calving, which means you're calving all the time, just to keep the supply regular, keep the same volume going into the tank, supply the local ice cream producer and soft cheese producer.
Is that always how you've farmed when you've been here?
No, we used to supply Milk Co-op, First Milk, when they had the creamery at Turlin, which was producing hard cheese, decided to close. we were given notice that they would still take our milk, but it was going to cost us to take it off the island. Option then was to either sell the herd. Well, that was the only option, was to sell the herd. And then the Arran Dairies and Arran Cheese Company came to me and asked me if I would produce milk for them. And I looked at the figures. Even though it's a restricted volume, I thought I could maybe make it work. That's what we've been doing for the last 6 years now.
John, we're sitting here on the 6th of May. Are the cows out yet?
They're not out yet. They'll go out on the 13th of May. I'm in an agro-environmental scheme. It's open grazed grassland for birds, and the cows' grazing fields are part of it. We're restricted to any grazing and fertiliser application or anything between the 15th of March and the 15th of May. The cows can go out after the 12th. So they'll go out for a few hours, the 13th. We'll stay inside at night for a couple of nights, 2 or 3 nights, just to get them used to being out and back in.
And are you seeing bigger bird populations in that period of time?
We did a bird survey, and the farm itself has got quite a good population of different wading birds and ground nesting birds. And part of the scheme was to try and just to encourage them, improve them. We've got plovers and various different birds nesting. The grey lag geese feed in the lower fields all winter. They take quite a lot of grass, and we've never got the cows out early anyway, so it was just gave the birds a chance and gave the cows a chance. So they're getting out onto a wee bit of grass. They're not out onto bare fields.
There was lots of dairy farms on Arran. Just at the start of today, because I knew this episode was coming, I put a little post on Facebook. Does anyone know how many dairy farms there was when I was born, which is the last week in 1996, so almost 30 years ago? And 12 seemed to be the answer that we got. At
one point, the creamery would open in late 40s. I think it was 47 the creamery opened. And at one point, there was nearly 100 producers on Ireland. Not producing large volumes, producing enough to make it viable for the creamery. Over the years, with one thing or another, have dwindled away.
And the big difference, and one of the big factors where you'd have probably seen the biggest change, was when it went from cans to going into bulk tank. Is that something you remember?
Yeah, it went from the milk churn, and they had to put in bulk tanks, which was a big expense, and a lot of the smaller producers felt it wasn't worth their while. A lot of the farms didn't have lorry access, so it meant they had to have access in for a tanker to pick it up. So at that time, a lot of the smaller farms went out of milk. And then when they brought in pasteurisation, which you couldn't sell raw milk, that was another hit on the producers. In the early 70s, there'd be 30-odd producers.
And that was still on island?
Still all produced on the island to supply the creamery.
Yeah.
All the milk went through the creamery.
There are some of the big changes, John, that reduced that number from, as you said, almost 100 to maybe that 12 in that lifetime of mine, the last 30 years. What do you think the reason that we've seen that decline all the way down to you are the only one left? I'm
the only producer left on the island now. The big push was to get larger, to reduce costs. And a lot of the farms on the island, without big investment, couldn't get any bigger. They didn't have the land, they didn't have the buildings. So it meant they were stuck at a certain level of cows, and it got to the stage where it wasn't economical or as economical to run, smaller numbers. We spent quite a bit and built a cubicle shed in 83 to go up to just under 100 cows. But milk quotas come in 83 or 84, and that kind of curtailed our plans. So we were left with the building, but not the quota. And to buy the quotas were costing more than what you were getting for producing the milk. So we just we rented in quota for a few years to keep our oversupply volume down. It certainly cut back on the production side, but that was Europe-wide. Quotas come in a European thing. Dairying gets a bad press at times because of how we rear our animals and how we produce milk because we take the calves off the cows. Some places like to leave the calves with the cows. I take the calf away about a day old, so it doesn't get too bonded with the mother, and you don't have any problems with them looking for the calf and the calf looking for the mother. And we hand rear all our calves. If you'd like to see the calves in the shed, they're happy. They're not with their mothers, but they look at me as their mother because I feed them twice a day and look after them. And the cows are easier to manage and happier to be running on the herd as such. But that's how the dairy side is worked for a long time. I mean, there is people pushing to try and leave calves with cows and milk them, take whatever milk they get off that the calf leaves behind. but they've still got to take the calf away from the cow.
I am totally on your side on that.
So we find it's better for us and better for the cow and the calf if we make sure she's healthy and it's healthy, and then separate them about a day old.
Quotas, there was a lot of challenges with quotas, but from what I can remember, it was a tradable commodity. I seem to remember Manchester United Football Club were one of the biggest owners of quota.
Yeah, anybody could buy quota.
Yeah. But the farmers struggled to because of the cost of production.
Because they didn't tie quota to the actual production-wise, anybody could own quota and lease it out. So that's what made it a tradable commodity. And it got to the stage that quota was selling for £1 to a litre. And at that time, we were maybe getting 12 pence for milk. Unless you could spread it over a longer period of time, it just didn't make it viable.
Yeah, there's been a lot of challenges, and I guess that question was what sort of led to that decline, challenge after challenge. Yeah. With a focus on, a lot of the stuff we're saying there, John, will be the case in a lot of places where there's maybe not much room for expansion, and that example's there, but the island thing adds to it as well. So how does farming dairy cows on an island like Arran shape how you manage the herd and how you farm as well?
Well, it's basically the same as farming dairy cows anywhere, but the problem we've got is all our inputs cost more. Everything that comes in on the ferry and then you need to send out goes on the ferry. So you're tied to these costs, and we try and do it as most cost efficient as we can. Like inputs, cutting inputs, try and grow as much natural fodder, grow a lot of silage for feeding the cows, buy in very little. Buy in a compound for the cows, and that's basically it. On the feed side, fertiliser, you need some fertiliser as well.
There's some good grass where you are in the Shiskin Valley though.
Well, it's a good grass growing area at this time of year. It's not so good in the winter time, it's very wet. Grass can grow now. From now on, we'll get good grass.
We sort of touched on it there with almost the whole point of this part of this episode, John, is looking at that transition to where we are now, yourself milking, and what the case was enter X amount of years ago. If you were to sort of speak to someone from past generations, whether that was 50 years ago, whether that was 100 years ago, what would the main differences be? And then, arguably more importantly, what would the similarities be that they would see in the farm today?
I think electricity, mechanisation put a big jump forward in the dairy side. When I started milking cows, we were milking in a byre with what they used to call a milk luggy, which was a 5-gallon churn that you milked into, and you carried it in up to the dairy and you put it through a ripple cooler into churns, and that was how you cooled the milk. The ripple cooler was just cold water in at one end and run the milk through it, and that cooled the milk. And that was how the milk was cooled. When the advent of pipelines and bulk tanks come in, that meant it was an easier job to milk more cows. You still had to feed them and all that, but the milking didn't take so long. Now we've got robots. Well, I haven't got robots, but this is the way a lot of places are going. It's robots that are milking.
And when you sort of look at the farm, John, you look out at you've been working on it the majority of your life. What gives you confidence that there is a dairy sector future on the island?
As I said before, we rely on a milk buyer, and the milk buyer relies on us. And as long as that's an equal partnership, and that we're getting the reward for what we do, and he's getting the milk for what he does, then it works. Whether there's a future, it's hard to tell. Just depends, because we're so dependent on each other. If he doesn't take my milk, I've got no market for it unless I market it myself. And nowadays, the milk that I put out to the dairy, Arran Dairy, goes into ice cream, and he's got vending machines around the island, and they're quite popular. They're still not taking the volume of milk that I could produce in a day. We've got to put into something else. So he does the ice cream, and Island Cheese Company does the soft cheeses with milk. You wonder if the future goes towards, as opposed to just a continuous commercial amount of milk being produced, that, like is happening currently, the right amount of milk for what's required for those products. Well, you've got to balance your market. That's what's wrong in Europe, even the world as a whole. There's too much milk at the moment. The push to produce more milk and the good weather we had last year, which meant the cows were producing milk, and it was cheaper to produce milk. And now the buyers are saying there's too much milk. Milk buyers are cutting the price to producer. They try and get the volume down, or they're on contracts where they restrict payment on a certain amount of litres. Whether you produce an A and a B contract, you get full price for A, anything over a certain level, you get paid a pittance for. Hopefully, the future lies in what's happening now, that sort of added value dairy product as opposed to sheer litrage. Yeah. John, thank you very much. Thank you, Wallace. That was good fun.
In my opinion, there's nothing that captures the character of a place quite like the taste of its milk. In a single glass, you experience something shaped by climate, geology, pasture, biodiversity, heritage and culture, all at once. I think that ability to hold so much character and identity is why Arran's milk is more than just a commodity for local people and visitors alike. During our tour of the cheese factory with Callum, one thing that really stood out was the strong sense of collaboration between local food producers and the shared attitude that everyone helps everyone out. There was also a clear theme of circularity and resourcefulness, shaped in part by the challenges and costs of importing supplies to an island that depends on ferry transport. As we heard, the byproducts from cheese making do not go to waste. Instead, they're reused to fertilise farmers' fields and are even used by Blackwater Bakehouse in the bread and pastry production. John also spoke about growing his own silage to reduce costs and minimise reliance on imported feed and other external inputs. If we ask what makes dairy production on Arran agroecological, I think the answer lies not just in farming practices themselves, but in the relationships that underpin the whole system. Across this episode, we've heard about the value of short supply chains for both ensuring quality and building strong links between milk producers and consumers. We've also spoken a lot about resource sharing and reducing environmental impact through cutting both external inputs and minimising waste. These are all ideas that sit at the heart of agroecology, a concept which is not only about producing food in a sustainable way, but also about building resilient local economies, strengthening communities and creating a food system that works with nature and the environment. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Agroecology Around Arran. Please join us next time as we continue our journey around the island, exploring more stories from the people shaping Arran's food and farming future. If you have any comments or questions, we would love to hear from you, and you can find our contact details in the show notes. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe so you can never miss a new release.